Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. And today we have with us Mathew Unger, who is the Managing Director and Senior Advisor of Focus Asset Management. Mathew, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, so tell us about Focus Asset Management and what you do with your clients, because I really love when I analyze or at least first pass look at names, Focus. And it's not just asset management, because we know what that is in the financial services world, but Focus Asset Management. What is it and how do you help your clients?
Sure. So we are a boutique financial advisory firm that specializes in two areas. So one is financial planning. And then two, the investment management of their actual assets. And what we really look to do is provide a high-touch, high-quality service to individuals that typically have $500,000 in assets and up from there.
And I think one thing that you said is really interesting, and what I heard was planning and then the tactics of implementing that plan. And I think that there are two really sections there in that statement. You can just hand someone a plan and say, go execute it, have a nice day, or you can do the plan as well as saying, okay, now if this feels right and sounds right, here's what we're going to do to execute it. So what do you do to show people that this is the plan and then to move forward from there?
So really what we look to do is understand our clients really in two areas. We want to understand them qualitatively and quantitatively. So we're gonna pop the hood in the first meeting or two that we have together. I really want to get to know the individual and what makes them tick. Because at the end of the day, if we're going to manage their assets, while that's a very important part of it, we're not going to be able to implement a plan that will bring them the success that they're looking for if we don't know them as individuals.
Yeah.
So for example, someone coming to us that has very low cash flow needs and maybe, let's say, $600,000 in investable assets, will have a far different plan than somebody who has a $1.5 million estate planning need, for example, or other complicated issues. So we really look to make a bespoke and customizable experience for each one of our clients. And we also do that by keeping our client rosters at a lower level. Typically, some of the larger firms you'll hear of, you'll have 300, 400, or 500 clients on an advisor's roster. And there have actually been studies that show humans can only deal with about 150 relationships. And our advisors that we will have, and specifically me, will have about half that roster size.
And what that tells you is it's almost like when you think about schools and you go in and say, hey, my kid is in a class of 50. How can the teacher give really good classroom control or education? Whereas if it was 20 to 25, now they're given attention. And the same in your world. If you've got 100, 200 clients, there's no earthly way that you are getting that high touch like you're mentioning.
Agreed. I think that's a great example.
So let's talk just a touch about, or just a little bit more about the high touch. So what does that really look like? So I kind of feel like I would know, but if someone was a client of yours and they had a question on their account, are they calling in and getting a call back in 2 or 3 days? Are they emailing in and hoping that they get a response? What really does high touch look like, and what are some expectations that your clients should come to expect?
I mean, assuming you're not emailing on a Friday night on a holiday weekend, you can really expect to get a response either by end of business day or within 24 hours, depending on the complexity of the issue. But what most clients find when they're with me is sometimes I may come across as that overbearing mother a little bit. I'd rather my clients be pestered by me contacting them too much versus them not hearing from me enough. Because really what you hear in the financial services industry, you get this slick talking guy. He's got really nice suit on, a bunch of nice looking cufflinks and shiny shoes that'll come to your house and take your $1 million under management. And, after the first 3 or 4 meetings, you never really hear from them again. And what we pride ourselves on at Focus is not only gaining your trust and really your respect to begin up front, we also want to educate you. We want you to understand what is happening with your money. And additionally, I just want to add, we have some clients that may not want us to manage their assets, but they want us for advice. So that's where that financial planning comes in. A lot of firms simply won't give you advice unless they have your assets.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily need to have your assets at focus to give you true, customized, specialized advice.
And that's a big distinction, because how advisors these days typically get paid is those assets under management. So that if that one advisor you're mentioning, those types of advisors, they're not going to give you their advice because in essence, they're not getting the return on your assets. So I think that's a really nice distinguishing factor and feature for you, where, it's kind of like a smorgasbord concierge. Would you like, the advice and implementation? Would you like the planning alone? So I really like that strategy there. You speak about and teach about helping your clients not outlive their income. And I like that approach, because so many times the temptation could be, we teach you how to quadruple your money, or we teach you how to, get X return on your money. You're focusing on something that is really, really hitting to the heart of the matter, which is, at the end of the career, your focus needs to be outliving your income. And how important is that? What are the advantages of focusing on that, not outliving your income?
Sure, and good use of focus as a verb there, Mike. And I'd just like to say up front, we do not sell annuities. A lot of the time you'll hear people say, oh, you want guaranteed lifetime income? Here, let's talk about this investment in vehicle, and it turns out to be a very expensive annuity. We don't think annuities are bad. In fact, in some instances, they work very well for clients. What we find more often than not, what clients truly care about is the money that they have worked their entire life saving, sacrificing, blood, sweat, and tears, you name it. They want to know that not only is that going to be okay for when they need it, they also want to make sure that they're not spending it in 10 years.
Yeah.
I mean, there are a lot of folks out there that, and I would argue pretty much everyone, at least I know, knows one person in their network that had a great retirement for 10, 15 years, and suddenly, well, they're 80, 85, 90, but they only expected to live until their late 70s or early 80s, and with life expectancy tables moving out further and further every year, it seems, clients are really struggling not only managing their cash flows, but also understanding, okay, where do I need to put these assets for them to do what I need?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really, really big piece of it. And unfortunately, if you ask someone at certain stages of their life, they don't value that as much. Someone in their 20s, it's like, yeah, I'll get to that. Someone in their 40s, it's starting to get a little bit more clear. But someone in their 50, 55, in that range, I think that now becomes so important, because they do have some of their contacts that are at that age, or they've heard their friends' parents that have hit 80, 85, and they're beginning to, run dry on their planning. So I really like that focus a lot. What do you feel are some misconceptions that people have around even just the investment and financial planning industry, but especially related to outliving their income?
Well, there are a lot of them, Mike. One that I come across over and over and over again is fear of failure.
Oh, yeah.
Clients often believe every investment they have in their portfolio needs to work. And they define success of an investment by its performance. And often they make the mistake of, well, I've had, XYZ company in my portfolio. It's done terrible. It's done negative 20% for the last year or two, and they go off and sell it. Well, what are they doing? They're doing the opposite of the cardinal rule of buy low, sell high. They're actually buying high and selling low. So what I help my clients understand is how to get into the what I call ready to fail mindset. And now, while that might sound a little negative, when you have a lot of little things that you have going at once, for example, a variety of positions in a portfolio, be ready for some of those to fail. But what people fail to realize typically in portfolio management is that your big winners offset your big losers. The bulk of the return in your portfolio actually comes from the middle of the road companies, the ones that are performing, 5, 6, 7, 8% a year. And so having a client understand that there are certain risks associated with however they manage their portfolio. Bonds actually carry more risk. Did you know they're actually more volatile than stocks? And I have this conversation with my clients quite frequently, actually. But if you have a couple components of the portfolio that are failing, and I'm using bunny ears, right, that are not doing well, if it's properly diversified, that's okay. And what I find clients hire me for is for me to worry about that.
Yeah.
They want to go off and see their grandchildren. They want to go to the movies. They want to be able to go to graduation parties. They want to maybe buy a boat and enjoy life on the ocean. Well, I ask clients, especially in down markets, did they picture watching CNBC every day and panicking when the market goes down? Is that how they pictured their retirement? Or did they picture enjoying time with their grandkids, enjoying time out playing golf and doing other activities that they love, right? So I really help clients identify the areas that they wish to enjoy in their life, and then I take care of the how.
Yeah.
They're at point A, they want to get to point B. I specialize in creating that plan for them.
You mentioned the fear of failure, and that's a big one in life, personal, any aspect of life. And I know that it's even more important in finances because that is your livelihood, now in the present and in the future. But it made me think of something else. Do you feel like also a misconception could be, hey, I sat down with you and we did this exhaustive, comprehensive plan, and I feel great about it. We high-fived over the plan. And now, months in, there's some fluctuations to the plan.
Yes.
Because nobody can say, here's exactly, like how many times are the weather forecasters accurate? Oh, a decent percent of the time, but anything can happen. Weather patterns can change. Well, the weather patterns in a financial plan can change and shift based on many factors. So I wonder if there's a misconception like, hey, here's this plan, and then all of a sudden 6 months into it, they go, hey, what happened? It deviated. Well, that's natural. So talk a little bit about that misconception of how this plan is accurate, but there could be some ebbs and flows. That's all part of the process.
Yeah, and I call that the number factor misconception. And what I mean by that is you look at the retirement marketing today and commercials on TV, and what do they say? What's your number? And you see these people walking around holding their numbers, right? One person's got 1.4 million, the other one's got 2.6 million. What that marketing does is it generates this image in one's mind that I need X amount of dollars to retire. What do I need my number to be? And what the marketing actually was meant to show was this is the dollar amount you need throughout retirement. And a lot of people have a hard time understanding, Matt, I brought you a portfolio of $500,000 when we started. 15 years later, it's still $500,000. You're getting me a 0% return. I come back and say, well, Mr. and Mrs. Client, don't forget, you've been taking about $40,000 a year from your portfolio through the ups and downs.
And so compound really interest plays into that.
Exactly. And over time, what clients can sometimes forget is I just took out $400,000 from this account over the last 12 to 15 years, call it. But I still have $500,000 left over. Oh, and by the way, I still have 15 years to go.
Yeah.
Again, remember we talked about life expectancy going further out on the tables. And suddenly, it's not all about performance. And what I show my clients and where I really shine for them is understanding that if you had, let's say, just for illustrative purposes, $20,000, but you can turn that $20,000 into the income that you needed. It doesn't matter what you end up with.
Yeah.
There's this, and then you kind of have the neighbor syndrome. Oh, well, my neighbor has this amount. Oh, and they're doing this, and oh, their return was that. And what I often find out is, because they'll sometimes even refer the neighbors to me, the neighbors have just been lying.
Yeah, I was literally just thinking that. I was like, well, how accurate do you think that? Because anybody's going to want to do the big fish story. Yeah.
And exactly. And what I find specifically about my clients is they are often the person in the room with the most money, and they don't realize it.
Yeah.
They're the one sitting on the big money, and their neighbors, might just be talking up. It may be true. They may have wealthy and other affluent friends. But I find my clients typically the millionaire next door who's worked hard their entire life, saved almost every penny they possibly could. They don't consider themselves to be rich.
Yeah.
But what they don't tend to realize is that they're the wealthiest person in the room.
Do you feel like sometimes people are making a comparison incorrectly, similar to in personal development or success? Don't compare yourself to the next person because that might be an apples to oranges comparison. Compare yourself to yourself. So compare you to where you were 1 year ago. Hey, I've made some progress. So in your financial examples, don't compare yourself to your neighbors or your coworker, because who knows, A, how accurate that is, and B, their world and their situation might be different. Compare you to you.
Yep. And I call that benchmarking bias, right?
Okay.
Sal, the neighbor who's also a fisherman like me, is doing this much in retirement. I'm only taking in $50,000 in income. He's taking in $100,000.
Yeah.
Well, what you don't know is Sal is on a depletionary trajectory, and he's going to run out of money in 5 years. And
Sal might be running up his credit cards personally and needing to take all that out to pay his credit cards, and you're not. There's a lot of variables.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
And I don't mean just to generalize here, but often my clients find out pretty quickly that not only are they usually more savvy than the people that they're trying to keep up with, but they're also usually in a much better situation than they are.
Yeah.
And crossing goals with someone else can be very dangerous. If you're chasing return, my buddy got 26% last year. My portfolio only did 15%. Well, again, performance is part of it, but if it's getting you to your objective and where you need to go, it doesn't matter. If you're doing a cross-country trip, you're probably going to spend the majority of your time in the left lane, right? Unless you're like me and you're afraid of highways and you just drive 60 in the right lane the entire time. But if your plan dictates that you need to be in the far left lane, it's what you need to be, right? We run statistical probability analyses to decide where our clients need to be invested, because we have to worry about supporting their cash flows, and most importantly, we have to support those cash flows throughout their longevity, which often tends to be much longer than they initially expected.
Yeah. Hey, can you think of an example, like maybe a case study without mentioning any names? You mentioned the fictional name Sal, but think of some time that you worked with a client with the goal of helping them not outlive their income, and whether this client you're talking about might not be 90 or 100, but think of someone you've worked with for enough time that you can say they came to me looking like this. We put a plan into action, and now here's some of the results that they're experiencing.
Absolutely. I'll never forget one client back in 2018. He kept going to cash because he was really worried about the volatility in the market. Mm-hmm. And I said, let's do an analysis. Do you need to be in the market anymore? He was in his late 70s. He had multiple income sources, not just the portfolio that I had. And I sat down with him and educated him on how he needs to help kind of lock down his behavior when markets get jittery, and shut off CNBC and spend some more time with his grandkids. And he started doing that. And as soon as he started doing that, my call volume with him dropped precipitously. Mm-hmm. Now, I really enjoy talking to him, so I'm not bragging that he stopped calling me by any means. But he
wasn't reacting, and he wasn't frantic.
And oftentimes, the markets don't do investors in; investors do themselves in. It's and I may be misquoting Warren Buffett, but that's a Warren Buffett quote. Another one is markets are a very efficient mechanism to transfer wealth from the impatient to the patient. And what this client finally realized was that going in and out of the market was costing him not just thousands of dollars in the interim, but hundreds of thousands of dollars down the line when you take into account compounding.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really big piece. You've brought up a couple really big points about, like, the example of the person that said, "Hey, 10 years ago we had 500, now we still have 500. What gives?" And you're like, "Well, you've been taking out this much per year, and with the loss of compounding and the loss of that amount going in, you're up." So that's a really, really good point. And I could just tell that when you talk about these things and strategies and plans and clients that you just are very passionate. I was wondering, what was your initial inspiration to become a wealth manager? Did you wake up one day and say, "Forget police officer, forget fireman, I want to be a wealth manager"?
Unfortunately, I abandoned those dreams of firefighter and pilot probably around age 3, but they've always kind of stuck with me on the side. But in all seriousness, I had a very, very close member of my family almost go bankrupt. And I'll never forget, while I was sitting on the stoop at my apartment complex in New York City when I got the call, and they said that they may be going bankrupt. And at that moment, I realized how important financial literacy is for every individual. And not only just the importance of financial literacy, but also understanding how finance is life. I think Chase Manhattan has the saying, "So you can." I think that's brilliant.
Yeah.
You don't save money up just so you can beat and pound your chest and dive into a pool of gold coins like Scrooge McDuck did. And maybe that is your goal. But in all seriousness, most individuals want to save and use their portfolio, whether it's invested or not, to support their lifestyle. So you can, right? It comes back to that saying. And so that moment was life-changing for me, and hearing this family member was almost going bankrupt, and I decided to devote the rest of my life's work to preventing that happening to as many families as possible. So that's why I became an advisor.
I love it. And so many times, you hear about, "Hey, you're a doctor. What inspired you to become a doctor?" Well, we had this family member who, or had this life experience that. And I think that is so neat to hear, from your perspective, even as granular as sitting on the stoop. So what was the lesson that you learned even from that still just impacts you today on how you advise your clients from that experience? What was maybe one of the main lessons you pulled away from that?
I would say never sugarcoat.
Yeah.
Never sugarcoat. And I mean that in how I treat my clients, but I also expect that out of my clients and how they treat themselves. If there's a problem, speak up about it. You've got to address it. And if you gloss over that problem and sugarcoat it, well, are you ever really going to get to the problem? I think there's a famous saying, right? In order to improve yourself or to solve a problem, one must admit they have one.
Yeah.
And that can be very difficult. And in a society where, talking about finances is taboo, right? In public with your friends, you don't go around saying, "Oh, I get paid this, so I have this in savings," right? We're a very private society. What is so important for clients, and even for me, is never to sugarcoat. And I got to tell you, it's tough. It is tough having a conversation with a 72-year-old who thinks they are set but are on a tremendous depletionary trajectory. And it's usually not because they're going out and gambling it all away. It's the death by 1,000 cuts, right?
Yeah.
The air conditioner goes out here. The roof needs replacing. Kid falls sick, $10,000 hospital bill. Oh, you need a hip replace. That's another, gosh, that's a lot more than $10,000. But retirement's not linear. And so admitting to problems along the way is one thing, but making adjustments is as equally as important as admitting that there is a problem by not sugarcoating, right? We can't control the wind, but we can adjust our sails, and that's what a good advisor does, and a good client follows in suit and admits when there's an issue.
Perfect. Love it. Hey, when someone is thinking about, maybe they've been considering some of these points that we've been talking about, and they start thinking, I wonder about my situation and maybe outliving my income. What do you feel is some of the most important questions that they should be asking themselves and considering?
I would say it's kind of a two-part question. It's usually one question that leads to the other. Which is, what do I want my retirement to look like? Mm-hmm. And that is, are you going to be traveling more? Are you going to want to relocate to be closer to family? Do you want to relocate to a facility that maybe offers better medical services, right? So that usually then leads to, how much money do I need in retirement? I think that's probably the golden question. And that you really can't put a number on that, right? Like the way the marketing does.
Because it's different for everyone.
It is different for everyone. That's not
and probably, am I correct in thinking that it's not even, I mean, it sounds cliche to say it's different for everyone, but the set of circumstances that cause it to be different for everyone, even those circumstances are fluid.
Exactly. And think about this. Let's say everybody needed $2 million to retire. Let's just say the society was exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what happens when one family goes through a car accident?
Yeah.
Their needs change drastically in an instant.
Yeah.
Which may or may not mean you need to make a major change. I mean, I had a client who had to reinstall their entire gas line in California. It was going to cost them $20,000 up front and $20,000 on job completion. It was damage caused by the Candlestick Park earthquake out in San Fran years ago. I also had a client that lived not far from them. They actually knew each other, and they had about the same dollar amount. This client called panicking. We're gonna run out of money. $40,000. This is a disaster. Well, I ran a scenario for them. I did a stress test of their portfolio, and I said, "You're fine. It's going to be fine." A lot of clients, when tragedy strikes, whatever that means to them, sometimes it's really not as bad as they think it is.
Yeah.
But having someone there, like an advisor, to kind of double check it for you is so important. I mean, if you're not feeling well, you probably should go to the doctor, right? You're not necessarily going to the doctor as the be-all, end-all, but get a second opinion and get a professional one too.
That's a really good point. And, you brought up a lot of excellent points that typically advisors in the industry are not focusing on. And so I like your approach. And that second opinion, even could be something where people kind of go, hey, my guy's pretty good, my gal's pretty good, but wonder if some of these strategies could work for me. So maybe that second opinion could be a great start to reach out and connect with you. What would be the best way that someone could reach out and connect with you and maybe get that second opinion?
So we've got a website. I try to make them as user-friendly as possible. It's focusassetmanagement.com. It's www.focusassetmanagement.com. I abbreviated it so people don't have to spell a lot. And on our website, we actually have a free crash course video on the 3 key elements to early retirement. So what I like about this video is it touches on things that are important to those that are looking to retire, whether it's early or not. This video just happens to be on early retirement. And then there's another video that reviews the consequences of waiting to plan for retirement. It's a small case study that we do. So that's a great way to reach us, is through our website.
Well, Matthew, thank you so much for your time today. It was really great getting to know you, your company, and your strategies.
Mike, thank you for having me. I really appreciate your time.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneursradio.com.